What's going on, everyone? Philly Insider Podcast here. Hunter and Drew. Talk some Phils. Excited for the season to start, Drew. We had our first baseball game today, which just was not really even a game from the get-go. But, hey, it was fun to watch something. How you feeling, Drew, as we near the first spring training game for the Phils on Saturday?
Oh, I could not be more excited, man. It's could not come fast enough. I wish Saturday was on TV because I'd I'd be glued to the TV for 4 hours straight. It's going to be a good time this year, definitely.
Yeah,
I'm excited.
absolutely, man. Yeah, it's exciting. Colby Allard is starting on Saturday. That is not the televised game. And then we'll all get to watch Nola on Sunday, which will be fun. So I'm looking forward to that, man. It's going to be good to have some baseball back. I was talking to my buddy about it. It'll be nice for the first couple weeks to have some spring training ball, and then we're going to all be ready for the regular season to start up after that. So that's kind of where we're at this point. But I also think it's interesting, just before we get into this, we're not really going to be talking about free agents a lot, but we've talked about a number of guys for a while now, and I am very surprised. I mean, I guess I shouldn't be surprised with how past off seasons have gone. But Drew, there's a lot of free agents still out there that are pretty impactful players in a class that wasn't really all that good. There's still a lot of notable names out there. So, any thoughts on that before we kind of get started on the lineup here?
I mean, I feel like they were obviously willing to go over that tax threshold that they're obviously trying to avoid, but I think for the right guy on like a short-term deal, I definitely could see them going out there and getting one of these big free agents that are still out there, whether it be
Sure.
Montgomery or even Bellinger, for whatever you want to say about that.
Yeah.
I think Cubs reunion for him looks the most likely, but
Yes.
it's anything's possible in the free agent world, obviously. But
Mhm.
I mean, there's definitely still some intriguing guys out there, I would say, but nothing other than Montgomery that really excites me that much personally.
Sure.
But that's kind of where I'm at with that.
Sure. Yeah, and I think with Montgomery, it really comes down to like, is the deal there? Like, is the market there? Like, the teams that would pay more for him, are they really not in the mix anymore? Because we really haven't been able to tell. I think it's the Red Sox signing to lose, honestly, but they don't seem like very eager to get that done, or else they probably would have it done at this point. So I don't quite know what's going on there, but the only other guy I would say is like if Whit Merrifield had not signed, a Tommy Pham would make sense, but we signed Whit Merrifield to a more of a part-time role. And with that said, I did do a live stream on that. Drew, you weren't able to make it, but I do want to get your thoughts before we get into this because he is kind of part of the lineup. I mean, he's your 10th player. He's going to be in a good number of the lineups this year, I would say. So I'm curious to hear from you. What were your thoughts on the Merrifield signing? I know you dealt with me getting very angry at first about it, and then I kind of leveled out on it. So that was
Yeah,
always fun.
I mean, I think like one of the big things that obviously we're never going to get to see is how good he is in the clubhouse. I mean, all the guys have already talked about that, and he's going to bring kind of like not filling what Reese did, but he's going to kind of like ease that a little bit because Reese was definitely a huge part of what they did in the clubhouse and their culture. So I think a lot of the young guys definitely are going to be looking to him for some advice or whatever it may be, kind of like they do with Harper and Turner and Schwarber. But as far as on the field, I mean, he's not obviously what he once was, but I mean, when he's going to be in a part-time role like this, he might shine a little bit. You never really know. Last year, I believe he played like over 130 games. I'm sorry. Um, but I think anybody that plays that many games, you're kind of going to get exposed for your weaknesses. And maybe that won't happen this year with playing maybe 80 or 90 games. So he's kind of maybe going to be like an Edmundo Sosa type where he's going to play meh defense. I mean, Sosa plays better defense than that, but like he's going to play good enough defense for him to stand out there whenever you need to give somebody a day off, whether it's Stott or Marsh or whoever it may be against a tough lefty. But I think he's going to give you enough at the plate that it's going to definitely justify keeping him whenever he's not overexposed. So kind of think of Edmundo Sosa, but for the outfield.
Sure. Yeah. And I honestly think you hit the nail on the head with the clubhouse thing, man. I think the Phillies front office has done a tremendous job of bringing guys in here who are great for the clubhouse. And in baseball, that's something that's very, very, very important. I don't think that can be understated. And I think it does go underappreciated by, especially now you have a lot of Phillies fans coming along who probably are more so football or basketball fans. And it is important in those sports too. I'm not saying it's not, but I think in baseball, it is much more important. I think baseball and hockey, those are two sports. It's very, very important. And I think that the Phillies have done a good job of bringing in talent while also bringing in guys who will fit that vibe as well. So I think you make a great point there. And yeah, like you said, I think with Witt, he's going to play all over. Probably more so going to get his reps in the outfield. Like he has played at a lot of positions, but when you look at the games he's played in his career, like very few at like a shortstop or third base. I don't think he's actually played at shortstop in the major leagues. He's probably going to, if Stott needs a day off, he'll play there. But he's probably going to get the majority of his reps splitting with Marsh, platooning a little bit. And then if Rojas doesn't hit too well, he'll start to mix in there a little bit. But it'll be interesting. And I don't know if it necessarily means the end of Sosa at third base. He was not great at third base last year.
Right.
I know Dombrowski did say that they do want to see Witt play over there at some point. So I don't doubt Witt will move around. How much he plays there, I think, is probably the bigger question. Like you said, Drew, he can stand out there. He has athletic enough, but if you get the Sosa defense at third base from 2022, I think that's a different story. But if you get Sosa from last year that made 11 errors at third base and not that much time there, yeah, it's probably going to be more Witt over there. So, any more thoughts on that before we kind of get started here?
My personal opinion on him playing third base is likely if he's playing third base, something really went wrong because Sosa, it's probably going to be Sosa's spot whenever Bohm needs off or Bohm would get injured. But I definitely think he could probably stand out there, kind of like he can at second base. But I don't think it's going to be anywhere near the potential that Sosa has out there, as far as like making outstanding plays once in a while.
Mm-hmm. No, right. I think you hit the nail on the head, and yeah, I think that's the thing with Witt is you have Sosa who primarily plays short and third, and then you have now Witt who plays second. He has played a little bit. Actually, I think he's played more first base than shortstop or third base, believe it or not. Can play a little bit of first and can play the outfield. Again, I don't love his outfield defense, but obviously he's fairly athletic, so he'll fare okay out there. But like you said, Drew, I think the other thing I forgot to say was, like you said, he got overexposed. And at 35 years old, you probably should not be, especially a player like him, who does rely on athleticism from time to time, you probably should not be playing 140 games. That just shouldn't happen. So, with that said, I do want to shout out Chris. Shout out to the Discord noti. So I'm glad that helped you. Anyone else who's in here, we got a Discord up. If you're listening to the replay, we got a Discord up. So let us know if you want the link. It should be in our community tab, but if you can't find it, let me know. I'll drop it over to you. And yeah, we'd love to have you there. We got some people there talking some Phils, and looking forward to a fun season of talking Phils in the Discord and Philly sports as a whole. So Ethan, welcome in. Let's go Phils. And Jonathan, welcome in. Good evening. With that said, Drew, I think it's time where we get into the lineup. This has definitely been a long time in the works with us going through the rotation, the bullpen, and the bench, and it all leads up to the lineup, which they're playing every day. These are the starters. These are the guys who are going to put you over the top in a playoff game. These are the guys who are going to come through in a big spot. This is definitely probably the most exciting conversation to have. So we both have our ideal lineups, Drew. Do you want to go first? Do you want me to go first? How do you want to do this?
I think I'll go first. I'll go first. I think they're going to be pretty similar, but there's obviously a couple spots. Like I definitely think the 4-hole is probably the biggest one that could be changed. But all right, so mine, I got Schwarber leading off. I just can't justify putting anybody up there other than him right now because that's where they've definitely seen the most success. So that's 100% what I would do. I wouldn't even question it. And if things go bad, I guess you can switch it up a little bit. Maybe put him back in the 4-hole and maybe move Turner up to the leadoff spot, put Bohm in the 3-hole, put Harper in the 2-hole. You could do a bunch of different things at the top of the lineup, obviously, but my ideal lineup is going to be Schwarber, Turner, Harper, Bohm, Stott, Castellanos, JT, Marsh, and then Rojas.
Yeah, I don't have too different of a lineup from you, Drew. Like, I think you hit the nail on the head with Schwarber, too. I am very much pro Schwarber leading off. I know this is obviously a topic of debate amongst a lot of Phillies fans, and I understand why. And I do think eventually Stott will be the leadoff guy. Down the road, I think that's probably going to happen. I would like Stott to walk a little more to get there. Also, he sees 4.1 pitches per plate appearance, and I believe Schwarber sees 4.3 roughly. So while that doesn't seem like a major difference over the course of a lot of at-bats, that is a difference. And I do think that Schwarber, yes, he strikes out a lot, but he's swinging at everything in the zone. He's not chasing very much. He's very, people are going to say because of the strikeouts, he doesn't have plate discipline. I would disagree.
I think
Go for
I
it.
think his on base is like 150 points higher than his
Yes.
batting average. Like that's impressive. I mean,
Right.
if he can hit like 230 or 240, he's gonna almost have a 400 on base, which is
Exactly.
that's huge.
Yeah, it's funny. I was talking to my coworker about this today, and I was like, the guy hit 197 last year and still had an 812 OPS. That's not normal.
Yeah.
You're doing something right if you're still at that 812 OPS. And I know I talk about OPS a lot, but that is like a big indicator for me. Like I do have a lot of. It's not the end all be all, but I do think it's an important number, especially in today's game. Then I have Turner 2. I don't think that's really up for debate. You got to break a lefty righty there because obviously Harper's going to be 3. The 4 spot is really where I was debating a lot. And I kind of came to the conclusion that it's probably going to be Bohm just because while he does ground into a good number of double plays, I think you're hoping that he is going to elevate the baseball a little bit more this year. He did last year, but not as much as we would have liked him to. And I think with him, like he still hits really well with runners in scoring position. I think he just kind of has to be the 4-hole guy right now. I have Stott 5 as well. I think we're probably going to end up having the same exact lineups now that I think about it. Castellanos, I think, is probably your 6th guy. I might hit just to change it up, I'll hit Realmuto there just because I think he does have a little power, and I think Castellanos did hit well in the 7-hole last year. I think you had those flipped, right? You had Castellanos 6, if I'm not mistaken.
I did, yes. Yep.
Okay. So I'll just for the sake of difference too, I'll add that there. So I have Castellanos 7th, and then I have Marsh 8th, and then Rojas 9. And then obviously if Marsh isn't ready or if Max Fried does start opening day, I would guess you'll probably see Merrifield out in left field. There's a very good chance of that. And I think he probably hits 8 as well. I think that's probably where you're putting him in the lineup. So, yeah, I mean, those are our lineups. We're going to go through each guy individually. I'm looking forward to it. Let's start with Schwarber, Drew, the leadoff guy. And I've already got a comment on it, too, with the lack of speed. And I do understand that. It is unfortunate that he is not the fastest guy. But I do want to get your thoughts, Drew, because we've talked about this before. Because one of the biggest needs we were talking about when we first started the podcast too was that left field spot and getting a guy to play out there. And the big reason was because Schwarber can't play out there. But we also mentioned a number of times that he did have the knee thing last year. And while he still wasn't good before that, I do think that he was a little bit better in left field. And to that point with the leadoff spot, I don't think he'll be as bad as he was on the base paths last year. Some of it was also decision-making too. So there's that. But while he does get on base and it's a bit of a detriment that he's not fast at the same time, I also think that starting off the game with 1-0 and with a bang in a playoff game is a pretty incredible way to start off. Like you kind of just can't write a better script than starting off 1-0 and putting a team in a hole early and making them feel like you're not coming into Citizens Bank Park and winning this playoff game. Like that's not a position you want to be in as a team, like a opposing team. And bottom line, Drew, they win. They win when he is in the leadoff spot. They tried it with Stott early last year. Maybe it was the early season woes. I'm not saying there's a correlation between us losing and Stott being the leadoff man, because like I said, I think eventually Stott will lead off, but they win with Schwarber in the leadoff hole because he is a winner. He is very disciplined at the plate. He will get you up 1-0. He'll get a double to start out the game. So while he doesn't have the speed, he'll put it into the gaps as well. It's not like he's always on first base to start the game. I think there's a lot of benefits to putting him in the leadoff spot. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on it too, and any points you have to make.
I mean, like I think you definitely hit the nail on the head as far as like jumping out to a 1-0 lead. Like you might not realize it, but that kind of like puts a damper on the fire of the other team. You know, you go out there in the first inning and the Phillies come up to bat and bam, it's 1-0 or 1-1, whatever it may be. But getting that early run, like it, I don't know if there's like an exact statistic on it, but the team that scores first, more often than not, I would say wins the game. And that, I mean, it's probably like somewhere around 60 or 70%, I would say, just without looking at it. But I mean, obviously, like Christopher said, like he does kind of clog the bases, I guess you could say. But I mean, if one of those guys hits a ball in the gap, there's a good chance that nobody's scoring from first. I mean, you could if it bounces around the right way or whatever it may be. But if you hit a ball like down the right field line, like if Turner hits one down the right field line and Schwarber goes to third, nobody's scoring on that ball unless it kicks around out there. So like it would have to go like a certain way for it to really change the outcome, I would say. I mean, he's obviously not as fast as what Stott would give you in the leadoff spot, but I don't think it makes that much of a difference throughout 162 because Turner and Harper are going to hit their home runs and if he's on first base, it doesn't matter how fast he is. So, I mean, I think he walked like 120 times last year or something like that, which there's not many guys in the league that walk 120 times in a season. And there's insane value in that. Like, he basically is like, he's on base half the time. It feels like, I don't know why. Like later in the games, he might strike out or whatever it may be. But it feels like when he's leading off a game, he's on base like 50% of the time. I don't know why it feels like that, but
right.
I mean, I think if he gets his batting average up maybe 20 points or so, you're going to notice a huge difference in his game this year. Definitely.
Sure.
I gave him a B for last year, by the way, just relative to his expectations.
Sure. Yeah, I had him as I think I had him as a B minus, just because, like you said, like, while I still very much appreciated what he did, and he still hit a lot of bombs, and he still drove in over 100 runs. Again, I think the other point to that is drove in 104 runs while being in the leadoff spot. You're not coming up with a lot of opportunities with guys on base. But also, like you said, he was not quite up to standard last year. He was a massive detriment in left field. Like I said, the year before he was a detriment out there, but last year it was much worse. And I would imagine the injury had something to do with that too. But I think, like you said it perfectly. Over 162, I don't think it makes a massive difference when you have Trey, who can also hit a home run and hit him in as well. And you also have Bryce behind him, who can hit him in and hit a home run. And you're going to get 2 runs that way if Schwarber's on base. So just having him on base, period. Like, I think you're going to still score runs that way. And also, like you said, he's going to get you out to that 1-0 lead. That's another way you're scoring runs. So yes, while Stott does give you that opportunity to have a man in scoring position, he's going to swipe some bags. He has an opportunity to score on a ball from first, and he's probably going to score on a ball from second. Over the year, I don't think it's a massive enough difference to where you're saying Stott should definitely hit leadoff. And I honestly would probably say, you're probably going to score probably the same, maybe more runs with Schwarber, just because he is getting on base, period. Right? Like Stott gets on base a good bit because he has a great bat. He makes contact a lot of the time. I would like to see him walk a little more. If Stott walks 10% of the time, I think there's definitely a conversation as to whether he should be in the leadoff spot or not. But you have a guy like Schwarber, the guy walks, I think, 18% of the time last year. That's incredible. That just, you don't see too many guys who walk I think it was 18. You don't see too many guys who walk 18% of the time in a season. That's a lot. And that's because guys don't want to be the pitcher to go down 1-0 early in the game. So that's
Stott's walk percentage was 6.1 last year.
Yeah.
So
I thought it was
literally 3 times the amount of walks, basically. I mean, that is insanely huge over a full season. Sure. So if Schwarber walked 110 times, that means Stott walked around 34, 35 times. That's crazy.
Right. Yeah. And I think to that point, like, if you're getting on base that many times and then you have those guys behind you who can go yard, especially we're expecting, one, a better season from Trey overall. And 2, we're expecting a fully healthy Harper this year. Then the amount of times Schwarber should come in to score, getting on base that many times, it should be a lot. I would hope it's a lot. So I'm excited about that. And you want to get to a few of these comments here before we move on? If you got anything else to say.
Yeah, sure. One thing I would say about it is, like, even if you would have Stott leading off, like, I think people kind of get it twisted. Like, he's not going to steal every time he's on first base.
Right.
Like, that's just not going to happen. I mean, he might steal. What did he steal last year? 31 bags, I think.
I think it was 31.
Yeah. He might steal 40. If you can get him in the leadoff spot, he might steal 40 bases. But just because somebody's leading off doesn't mean they have to be fast. I mean, it's not really the way it works anymore, unfortunately. Because your best hitters, I feel like back in the day, your best hitters were hitting at the top of the lineup, like first or second. And it's not really like that anymore. You want guys on base in front of your best players. And our 2 best hitters are right behind Schwarber. And I think he has the highest, or probably second highest behind Bryce, highest on base percentage on the team. Like, that's massive, definitely.
Yeah. And he's one of your best hitters too. So you also want him at the top of the order as well, to that point. But I think I had another point to make, but I'll remember it, I'm sure. It was pretty much along the same lines. And Jerry Lee, welcome in. Glad to have you in here. And yeah, Chris, appreciate the opinions too. We'll keep that in mind too, because I'm sure we'll be sitting here in May, Drew, talking about how it's been pretty unbearable to watch Schwarber at the leadoff spot. And then June Schwarber will happen. And that's like, if he just, I think the biggest thing with him is, like, if he just doesn't get out to a super, super slow start, his numbers will be so much better throughout the year. I would bet from June on the past 2 years, he's probably hitting around 220, 230. And exactly what you need from him. Is you don't need much more than that. If he hits 250 or 260, man, I mean, that we're talking about a really good Schwarber season next year. So I'm excited about that. But it's the
He'll get MVP votes for sure.
Yeah, that's what I was talking to my buddy about today. So definitely with you on that. And I agree with this too. I think not having him in left field is going to do wonders for him at the plate. You saw last year when he got moved into that DH spot for the rest of the year, it looked a lot better. So I'm very much looking forward to that. A little courtesy runner for Schwarber at first base. I would not be opposed to that, Jerry Lee. Like a catcher in high school baseball or middle school. A courtesy runner would be great. I love Schwarber leadoff. OBP equals wins. His threat on the first pitch makes the pitcher uncomfortable. Yeah, it's exactly what we were talking about, Drew. I mean, it's pretty much a huge factor in why we both have him in our leadoff spot. Jerry says, so stoked for baseball. Yep, we're both sitting here very ready to go. And yeah, we're going to talk about Bowman in a second too. That he's an interesting conversation to have. Jonathan says, I don't mind Kyle leading off, but it would be nice to not have to rely on a homer in order to score when Schwarber is on base. Yeah, I mean, that's also a fair point, but I have a counterpoint, but if you want to make any points to that, Drew, I mean, I think we kind of did cover it a little bit, but go for it.
Yeah, I mean, like, I feel like that's kind of like not a bad way to look at it, but like, it's not the only way they can score. I mean, Trey's going to get on base. He's gonna take his walks too. I mean, he doesn't walk a ton, but I mean, he's going to hit a lot of singles. He's a contact hitter. So, I mean, if he's hitting a single through the right side or maybe close to down the line, Schwarber's going to go first to third. I mean, he did it plenty of times last year. It's not like it's impossible. And I mean, even if Trey hits one in the gap and it bounces around the right way, I mean, Schwarber can score from first. It's not that bad, but I don't know. I don't think it really affects them too much long term, like throughout the whole season. That's just the way I feel about it.
Yeah, I'm with you, and I think to that point too, like, like you can't rely on that every single time, but you're going to be able to count on a home run from one of those guys a decent bit of the time, like relative to a lot of other guys in the league, right? Chris says, I don't like the idea of counting on the leadoff home run with a K rate of 30% and home run percentage of 6.5%. And obviously, like, yeah, your home run percentage is going to be lower than probably your K rate, right? That's just, you're not going to hit as many home runs as many times you're going to strike out throughout the year. That's just baseball. I'd take a higher percentage of a hit or walk from Stott, especially if we're counting on more hits from Turner. But I think we kind of both made the point. You're not necessarily getting a high percentage of a Stott walk leadoff. It's 6%. That's not very high. I mean, I would like I said, if Stott walked 10% of the time, I definitely think this is more of a conversation. The only reason I think it would be not really still a conversation is because of the comfortability of Schwarber there, which that's a whole separate debate to make. Because again, we don't really know what the deal is with that. I don't know if Schwarber would be willing to move out of that leadoff spot if asked to. But like I said, that's a whole nother point to make. But point being, again, you're not getting like a super high walk percentage from Stott. So then when you factor in that Schwarber, yes, he is striking out a lot of the time, but he's also seeing, like I said, he's seeing 4.3 pitches per plate appearance. He's relaying that information to the rest of the lineup. I think he does a good job of that. And he's striking out at pitches in the zone. I think that gets overlooked a lot. He's not chasing out of the zone for these pitches. He's going to take his chances and he's going to take his hacks because he's going to try to go yard or he's going to try to get a big double or a home run early on. And I the chance that happens 1 out of 4 times every game, like, I think there's a pretty good chance that happens. And he's going to have his slumps because that's the player he is. But we know those slumps. I will take those slumps if that means they're probably going to be in April and May and maybe the first round of the playoffs when he's going to do it in June and the rest of the season. And then he's also going to do it in the NLCS and beyond when it matters most too. So that's kind of the argument. I think I kind of restated a lot of the points we made, but that's kind of where I stand. But do appreciate the comments from Chris. I mean, I understand the logic behind putting Stott there. And like I said, I think eventually Stott does become the leadoff man. Still there, Joe?
Yeah, sorry.
You're good.
Yeah, I mean, I think even though whenever he's slumping, he still does take his walks. Like that's nothing you can overlook and just discount that because you're on base whether it's a single or a walk. That's kind of why he brings you value in the leadoff spot. I mean, he doesn't hit a lot of singles, but he's still going to give you 110 plus walks more than likely every single year. He's a pretty patient hitter, actually, whether you want to think about it like that or not, because like you said, 4.3 pitches per plate appearance. That's, if I were to guess, probably top 10 in the league. I mean,
Yeah.
there might be 2 or 3 guys above him, but I mean, it's impressive for sure. But I mean, I think we kind of covered everything on Schwarber at this point. I think we can probably move on to Turner.
Yeah, I think the only thing left to say would be with Chris, what Chris says. Like, yeah, he did hit 208 after June, but like for Schwarber, that's still pretty good. That probably means he's getting on base like close to 40% of the time. And his OPS was probably much higher at that point too. So, but that's kind of where we stand on it. And Calvin says the speed done first doesn't mean much for double plays. Having Turner bat second is ideal because you're likely not going to double him up. That's another great point too. I remember Hoskins hitting second, and he hit into so many double plays. And yeah, while we love Hoskins, like that was one of the the issues you had with him hitting in that spot. I believe, did Hoskins hit? He hit in the 4-hole in the playoffs the year before this past year. Am I correct in saying that?
Who hit in the 2-hole? I don't remember.
I want to say it was Bohm in the 2-hole that year.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah,
I remember that now.
Yeah, so I wonder how many pitches he sees per at bat. And like I said, Schwarber sees 4.3 pitches per plate appearance, and how that compares to other players. I would imagine it's probably pretty high up there because I think the next closest was Stott at 4.1. I feel like he gets a full count a lot and applies pressure. So and that's the other thing. We'll talk about Stott too. He fouls off a lot of pitches, but and this is the other thing to make. Sorry, I know we're not moving on to Turner right away, but we're getting some good comments on this. So I just wanted to get
absolutely. Yep.
But I would be shocked that, and that's the other thing is like the other part of it is like it's not really like I'm not saying it's not. I think for the fan base, it's a great conversation to have. But then when you consider what the team is probably going to do, like that, I don't see any scenario in which they're moving him out of the leadoff spot. I think it's going to end up being Schwarber there, and like you said, Drew, unless something drastically bad happens where he's past June. I think if you get past June, it's probably not going to be great. So
you can't argue with results. I mean,
yeah,
it's just the way it is, unfortunately.
Yeah, right. But yeah, I think like you said, Drew, let's get to Turner. Let me get your thoughts first on him in the 2-hole and just talk about his year last year and the year coming up too.
I mean, the grade I gave him for the whole season and the playoffs was C, because he needs to put it together for a full season before I can give him anything above that. I mean, you're getting paid $27 million a year. I mean, you got to perform the whole season. I mean, it's just the way it is, unfortunately. But I mean, the second half he had, it was unbelievable. I mean, if he can play like that or even close to that for a full season, he's going to be probably in the top 10 for MVP voting. I mean, he was just outstanding. I think he had like 1,000 OPS, right?
Yeah, I mean, at that point in the year, yeah, I would think so. It was crazy, man.
Yeah, it was definitely a special second half for him, and it was a lot of fun to watch whenever Bryce came back and kind of got his power stroke back, and him and Trey were just destroying people. It was ridiculous. But I think his defense could also definitely improve a lot. He made quite a few terrible errors last year, and most of them it felt like was in the first half of the year. So I kind of give him a pass on that. He was just kind of in a bad place, probably mentally. But I think he's easily going to bounce back this year and put it together and have an MVP type season.
I'm with you, Drew. I think he is going to have an MVP caliber season this year. And I think a lot of people are kind of expecting that too. I think you said most of it. He gets a C+ from me, mostly just because his hits came in big moments, and he did have some really good playoff moments. And when he went cold, a lot of the team went cold. Like, it wasn't like, oh, Trey Turner reverted back to what he was earlier this year. It was, no, the whole lineup got figured out and they had nothing. They had no answer. So I think for the most part, he was really good. He was a reason in the playoffs that we made it as far as we did. And once the standing O happened, and once he kind of got going after that, I think we all were kind of wondering, like, all right, when is this going to wear off? And it didn't throughout the rest of the season. He was incredible. That was even better than the Trey Turner I think we were hoping for the rest of the way. Obviously, he's not going to replicate what he did the past 2 months over a full season, probably, because 1,000+ OPS over a full season would be kind of wild. But I still think you can expect not far off of that. Like, I think you should expect like a performance not far off of that for the whole season. And to your point about the defense too, yeah, a lot of errors last year. And I was personally not expecting Trey to be that good defensively, but I didn't expect him to be as bad as he was. That being said, he comes through in that NLDS game one. We definitely do not win that game without the play he makes at shortstop with Strom on the mound. That was a hard hit baseball by Ozzie Albies. That's an incredible play. I still don't know how he made that play. It blows my mind. Like, I remember watching that live and where I was watching that, and it just gives me chills. Like, that play, he shouldn't make that play for a guy who's made 18 errors, I think it was, over the whole season. So I'm looking forward to a full season this year. I don't expect him to be amazing defensively, but I do expect him to improve in that regard, and I think he will.
Yeah.
So
I think he's worked very hard at it as well.
100%. Yep.
I think they've done a lot this offseason. Kind of like another guy down the list a little bit has done a lot this offseason, which is pretty exciting.
Yeah. Yeah. And actually, I think everyone is right that I think in that NLDS game 5, or Hoskins was hitting too. So I forgot JT was hitting in the 3-hole that playoffs. A lot has changed since then. But,
that's crazy.
A lot of guys were younger back then. But back to Turner, though, I am very much looking forward to the year he had. Like you said, I mean, it seems like Bobby Dickerson's a really good infield coach, too. Like, he's gotten the best out of Bohm. I think Harper, you can see he goes in there. Maybe that's part of just Harper being Harper and the natural athleticism and feel for the game he has. But he goes over to first base, looks very comfortable. I think we're going to see Bryce play even better at first base, especially with Dickerson as the coach and getting him better. And I think you're going to see Trey improve in his second year here. And knowing that he has the fan base behind him going into this year, I think that makes a big difference. The weight is off his back. Yes, he still has, 12 more years to fulfill. But at the same time, you're not feeling that like, oh, shoot, I have to prove myself to the fan base. No, we have embraced you. We know what you're capable of. And I think that standing O, like it did more for just his whole tenure as a Philly, not just last year, than people realize. So that's all I got on Trey, honestly, man.
Yep. I would say, like, final thought on it, expect Trey to be Trey this year. That's really all I can say about it. I mean, he's going to be great. Just know that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a good way to wrap it up. And as Chris says, he's expecting it as well. Turner needs to be the guy we signed up for. I just want him to be the setup guy and get in scoring position for Bryce or Bohm. Exactly. And that's a guy who went 30 for 30 on stolen bases last year. So he's going to pick his spots. He has the speed. He's going to be smart about it. And he's going to be in scoring position a good amount of the time throughout the year. That's a weapon that's something you definitely want in your arsenal, especially in a playoff game. That's exciting to think about. But I think we should talk about Bryce going on to this year. Obviously, like I said, Drew, we are expecting a fully healthy Bryce for this upcoming season. First time in a couple years that we were hoping for a fully healthy Bryce, because last year he was coming back from the injury. The year before he was DHing and he took some time off because of the injury. It's exciting to think about Bryce playing 140, 150 games at first base. And it's going to be weird seeing him there every day. Still is weird to me. Like, I was thinking about it the other day about how Bryce played first base in the playoffs for the Phillies. That just feels weird because he, like, right field is that's his spot. Part of me does miss him out there because, man, he could gun some guys down. But seeing, I mean, I would be very afraid to be one of the other infielders and receiving a throw from Bryce when there's someone coming at my base that I got to tag, because that's going to get on you in a hurry. That's exciting to think about now.
Yeah, luckily JT has a catcher's mitt because it's most of the time going to be him getting it.
Right. Yeah, exactly. But point being, this is our guy, Drew. I mean, there's not too much to say on him. I gave him another A+ for last year. I get maybe some people give it an A and A-, but this guy, man, it's just every time the moment is the biggest, he comes through. And I know people will say the D-back series, he's inches away from a couple of those baseballs going out. And I'm not going to kill him over one game that we shouldn't have been playing where he was a little bit short, and it really wasn't on him that we did not come through in those spots. Like, the whole team fell apart. The whole lineup fell apart. But Bryce is the guy, man. I'm expecting another MVP candidacy year for him. And last 2 years, the only reason he hasn't been in it is because he's not been healthy the whole year. So I'm expecting him to have another playoff run too and be our playoff MVP once again.
Yeah, I mean, he's that guy, really. I mean, whenever the lights are the brightest, he is definitely just a special player. He is so good. It's like there's really nothing to say. I mean, he's the MVP. I mean, he's our best player, no question about it. I mean, I don't know how, it's kind of like a sidebar, but I don't know how you feel about a contract extension for him. But I mean, personally, I mean, all of us love Bryce, but I would probably just wait a little bit and I mean, that's kind of like a big commitment to make right now. But I mean, if they do it, they do it. I'm not going to be upset about it by any means. But I don't know. It's kind of a funky situation because you don't see guys sign new contracts when they have 8 years left or something like that. But
It's weird.
yeah, I gave him an A from last year. I mean, I think the only reason I didn't give him an A plus because he had that power outage when he came back, and
That's true.
he didn't hit any home runs for I think it was like 30 games or something like that.
Yeah.
But I mean, other than that, he's the best, man. He's also, it's criminal that he's not top 10. He got ranked behind Julio Rodriguez on the MLB top 100. That's insane.
Yeah.
But I mean, other than that, I mean, yeah, like you said, there's not much to say. I mean, everybody knows what Bryce brings and what he's going to do for you. He's one of the best clubhouse guys as well.
Yeah.
That can't be understated.
Mm-hmm. He's a leader, man. He's a leader. And yeah, to that thing about Julio, like no Julio hate here. I love Julio. I think he's an awesome player. I don't think he's far off of that, but he did not start off the year that well last year. And he did, granted, Julio did have an unreal tear that he went on, but I don't know. I mean, if I'm picking a player, and again, part of it is also the Mariners front office has done a terrible job of building around him, and they've made some very odd moves over the years. They did try to go for it with Luis Castillo, but you ran into the Astros. I get it. That being said, Bryce has just been that guy who has elevated his team. And I think to your point, Drew, there's something about him as a leader too. And I think he gets the best out of his teammates because of the way he shows belief in them and the way he carries himself in the locker room and the way that he leads this organization too. There's been multiple years where he's let the organization know and he's told the media, we need to make a move at the deadline. And I will, I would hope we will. Basically saying, I would be disappointed if we didn't. So I think he's put the right amount of pressure on the organization. He obviously has a good relationship with the front office too. But I do think to that point about the extension as well, Jonathan said it, Middleton, going up to him and saying that he deserves, that he underpaid him. Yeah, that's not the best thing to say. And I can kind of understand why maybe they're looking for something. But to your point, Drew, I'm with you. Like, I would give it a year. If he's healthy the full year this year, sure, why not? Because Bryce is Bryce. I would hope by the time he's 39 to 43, I'm not going to be too concerned about the level he's performing at. I would hope I'm just thankful he's been a Philly his whole career and that we hopefully got a ring with him by that point. That is what I would hope. You obviously don't know for sure, but
yeah,
he is a guy I want to be a Philly for life. And the Boris comment, I think it was pretty much Boris who was putting this stuff out where it was like, oh yeah, well, he just wants to be a Philly for life. He's signed till he's 39. I don't think that's a major concern. I think he's going to end up being a Philly for the rest of his career. But to your point, like I would give it a year and just worry about what you have to worry about on the field this year. We're in our like we both talked about, we don't think the window's small, but you are in your window right now. This is a really good opportunity this year. The last couple of years have been good opportunities. Let's focus on this year. Let's go attack it. But I don't have much else to say on him, man. He was so good. Calvin says he was worried about him having a huge error in the postseason at first. Would have crushed the spirit of the team. And of course he didn't. And it was awesome. Yeah. And look, love Reese. I would have loved if he could have come back. And I loved him while I was here. But that was the one thing. He got booed before the game with the bat spike. Like he got booed when he came up to bat earlier in that game because he made an error in game 1 or game 2 that potentially cost us that game. Obviously, that wasn't the only reason we lost that game. But point being, that was an issue we had over there. And it's crazy that Bryce comes in and he's barely played there and he just looks like a natural. And he's only going to get better. Like he's going to be a Gold Glove caliber first baseman, I think, with time. Maybe not this year quite yet, but I feel very good about that.
Yeah, and people that say like his value is diminished because he's playing first base, that's just not true. I mean, he's just as good of a hitter as Freddie Freeman is, and Freeman's been a top 10 player, I believe, in the rankings every year for the last 5 years. I mean, if there's not value in that, I don't really know what to tell you. I mean, he could easily be just as good of a glove over there as Freddie. I mean, no question about it. He looked really good last year. So,
yeah, I don't really have anything else to add on that, man. I love Freddie too. But
absolutely.
With that said, I think it's definitely a good time to get to Bohm too, who is hitting in that 4 spot. And honestly, I think this is kind of where, not that the lineup falls off, I don't want to say that, but this is definitely where it gets interesting because you have different things you could do to kind of mix and match. And I think this is one of the spots that maybe won't remain the same at the end of the year, but I think we're both hoping that Bohm is going to fill the void well enough. I want to hear your thoughts on Bohm. I have a lot to say on him. I love Boom. He's awesome. There's a lot that he does well, but there's also a lot he can improve upon too.
Right. Yep. I gave Bohm a B from last year just because I feel like he has that potential to unlock his power even more, and he didn't do that last year. But if he gets to being a guy where he's going to hit 30 home runs every year, he's going to be such a good player. It's going to be unbelievable because he's going to knock in 100 runs basically every year if he's batting fourth, because he's going to get a ton of opportunities. Like, it's not that he's one of the best hitters in the game or anything, but he's a very good contact hitter, and he bats behind Bryce Harper and Trey Turner. I mean, that's like a golden opportunity to have 100 RBIs every single year.
Yes, it is.
And he is also the type of guy that could probably go out there and hit 300 for a full season if he has everything go his way, get good breaks here and there. And with the way they're scoring stuff nowadays, you can easily hit 300 if a lot of stuff goes your way. They're giving hits to guys on the most random stuff. But
right.
Yeah, Bohm is definitely he has massive upside this year if he unlocks his power. Because even if he hits 275 and hits 30 home runs, that's very valuable out of the 4-hole when you're batting behind guys that get on base like those guys do in front of him. And also his defense massively improved last year. I mean, everybody knows that.
Right. And on that point too, again, you're not going to get Gold Glove defense from Bohm, but he did enough last year. He did have an error or two here and there. It happens. It's part of the game. And for him, he's a guy, he doesn't have a perfect glove, so there are going to be a few, but I think the biggest thing for him is honestly just learning not to dwell on it, right? And that's what I think we saw him do last year. And I love that in that Brewers game, he made it. There was a Brewers game where he made an error. I want to say it was August, and it pretty much cost us the game. And Trey goes up to him and says, "You're going to make that play in the World Series." Now, obviously, that didn't happen, and that sucks. But the fact that you have a teammate who's going to go pick you up like that, I think that's encouraging. And to know that Bohm, he's kind of past that point of I effing hate this place. I think that we're in a better spot with him now defensively. And I also think while he doesn't get to every baseball, there are some baseballs he'll get to because of his length and his frame, right? He's a bigger guy. He's going to be able to extend out and get some of those baseballs. As far as the offensive game goes, like you said, he's going to get a lot of opportunities. Needs to elevate the ball a little bit more. I think you said it perfectly, Drew. If he hits 275 with 30 home runs, do not care if he's not hitting 290, 300, because at that point, you're making up for it with the power you have. If he's walking a little bit more, I'm going to take that too. I believe he did walk a little bit more last year. I was encouraged by not that he didn't have great plate discipline. I do think generally he has a pretty solid eye, but I think it also sometimes his plate discipline being, looking good is also masked by the fact that he does sometimes reach out of the zone and he still gets the barrel of the ball and he pokes it out there. But, there's some times where it's like, okay, well, you could have laid off that pitch and maybe gotten a better pitch to hit, or you probably also could have gotten on first by just getting a walk and getting on first base too. So I think that's kind of the key for me with Bohm is, again, a little more power. Even if he hits 22 home runs next year, I would be very content with that. I would feel very good about that because I think did he hit 17 this past year, if I'm not mistaken?
No, he hit 20 on the dot.
20. Okay. So, yeah, I guess you probably would have wanted a little bit higher than that. I thought he hit 17. 20 is actually more than I thought he did. So that's encouraging. I think also with him, you look at the opening day home run versus Jacob deGrom, opposite field, and you're like, oh my gosh.
Breakout season.
Yeah, he put on some muscle. Didn't quite sustain that throughout the year, but yeah, I think to your point, 30 home runs is a good mark to try and hit for him. If he hits 27, 28, the Jason Worth number, I'm cool with that. And speaking of Jason Worth, very similar player comps too between those two. Same number, similar hair, similar frame, different positions, but not the exact same hitter, but definitely interesting comp there. But I do want to get to some of these comments too before we talk a little bit more about Bohm. I like some of these comments too. Extend Bohm. We have talked about that a little bit, Drew. I think a 1-2 year extension might make sense, but we are both high on Andrew Miller, and I think there's a good chance he comes up at some point. And at the price Bohm is at right now, I think it makes a lot of sense to keep him around. But we're gonna have to see where Aiden Miller goes, how he develops, and cross that bridge when we get there.
Yeah, I think if they view Aiden Miller as a no doubt about it third baseman, then Bohm is likely gone as soon as his arbitration years are over. Unfortunately, I mean everybody loves him now, which rightfully so. I mean, I bought his jersey after the 2020 season. I was all in, and I don't regret it, obviously. But I mean, like I said, if they view Miller as a third baseman long term, then I don't think they're going to get something done with him. But I mean, I wouldn't be complaining if they did. Obviously, he's only getting
Right.
better every year. I mean, he did take a big step forward this past year, just not how everybody expected him to. I would say, because I think a
Sure.
lot of people expect him to unlock that power, and he kind of didn't. But he
Yeah.
obviously has the frame to hit 30 home runs. I mean,
Right.
no question about it. He's a big guy, and he likely isn't a third baseman long term, which I think that's going to hurt him because he's going to have to be likely a first baseman, and
Sure.
your franchise cornerstone is playing first base. So
Yeah.
I don't think there's really going to be a place for him here come 4 or 5 years from now, unfortunately, because he's not going to stick at third base.
Right. And the hope is that we win a World Series before he leaves. That would be ideal, I think. That would be awesome. But we'll see how that ends up. But yeah, that's kind of where we stand on the Bohm extension. I also gave him a B. I think that's a very fair grade. I don't think there's much reason to move higher or lower than that. So it's kind of where I stand. Calvin says, whoever is hot between Bohm, JT, or Cassie can bat for, in my opinion. And that could very well end up being the case, especially as we move closer to the playoffs. I'm sure they will. They're going to be willing to adapt if they feel they need to. But we'll get to JT and Cassie in a second. He puts quality at bats up because he knows there are guys on base. Yeah, I think you're always going to get a pretty quality at bat from Bohm most of the time.
Yeah, sometimes he goes up there and he looks lost. I don't know what. It's like once in a while he just goes up there and he swings at 3 pitches and he's done. But
yeah.
I don't know. I mean, like he said, he puts up quality at bats definitely most of the time, and that's definitely huge whenever you have somebody like Stott behind you who also sees a lot of pitches. Because if you have Harper and Turner on in front of you, you can really wear out a pitcher in one inning if you put together an inning like that.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Be nice for Bohm to become a doubles machine. Yeah, that would be great. I mean, I think he's done a good job of hitting doubles, but if you can hit them to the deeper part of the ballpark and continue to do that at a higher rate, for sure, I would love to see that. Welcome in, Rob. Weird flex. I'm a professional hitting coach. Well, glad to hear that, Calvin. I think he did tell me that before with his own business and work with D1 players. And I see Bohm's swing as cutting across the plane of the pitch. Hard for him to pull the ball well. Yeah, I think that's definitely an interesting point to make. And it sounds like you would probably know more than I would on that. So I'm definitely going to take your word for it. But yeah, he does tend to go opposite field a good bit. And that's kind of been his MO. That's kind of why I've always liked him, is because he takes the ball to the opposite field. But again, I do think for a guy with that frame, you do want him to be able to pull the baseball if need be and get his hands inside on higher velocity and not get jammed. So that is definitely something he needs to improve upon. Doesn't need to try to pull the outside pitches, but point being, there are definitely times where he should probably pull the ball well or better than he does.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes he does pull the ball and he hits absolute tanks, which it's fun to watch when he does that. But he, like his all over the field approach when it comes to hitting it's something you need out of a guy in the 4-hole sometimes, because having a guy there that is strictly pull power is usually leading to a lower batting average. And I think his batting average mixed with his power is kind of a big deal. And that's kind of why they like him there, I believe, because he does hit a lot of doubles. He had 31 last year. And it's not the 59 Freddie Freeman had, but that's kind of like ridiculous.
Yeah.
I think the second most was Corey Seager, and he had 42. So
yeah, there you go.
But 31 doubles is nothing to sneeze at. I mean, it's quite a bit. But I mean, he's going to get his opportunities this year, no doubt about it, especially with Bryce being in front of him the whole season. So I think it'd be nothing for him to maybe have 115, 120 RBIs this year if he has a great year.
Yeah, absolutely. And Calvin says he doesn't see him hitting 25 bombs anytime soon. I mean, time will tell. But yeah, he is a great competitor too. Like the reason he was mad a couple years ago is because he wants to do well, and he wants to compete, and he wants to perform his best. Key for Bohm, Chris says, is getting runners in scoring position in. He was elite in that category last year. Unfair to argue his opportunity was higher. Only 10 more plate appearances than Trey Turner with runners in scoring position, and he had less than Kyle Schwarber yet. / 344, 470, 860. Yeah, he was great with runners in scoring position last year. And I think part of that's also, Trey was not himself for majority of that season too. But he did get, he's in the 4-hole. He's going to get more opportunities than probably a Castellanos or a Realmuto. I'm sure there's times where maybe it doesn't seem like that, but point being, he's still going to get a lot of opportunities relative to a lot of the other guys in the lineup. Obviously, the top 4 are going to have their opportunities, but he was great last year with runners on.
Yep, I totally agree with you.
Yeah, and the rookie year was fun. 2020 was a good Bohm year. So, Yeah, that was awesome. Calvin, thank you for tuning in. Appreciate having you here. And
Appreciate you.
yeah, we'll see you soon. I think the power is coming, Jerry says. And yeah, this is really the question with him. Triples would be great. I mean, he's not the slowest guy in the world. I don't know if I see him leading the league in that category, but appreciate the prediction, Ethan. We will see. That would be a fun sight to see, I think. And last comment here before we get over to the back of the lineup. But if he makes that small tweak, he would hit 30 bombs, no doubt. There are players who make those adjustments in the MLB: Harper, Daniel Murphy, Justin Turner, JD Martinez, etc. Hoping for Bowman. Yeah, maybe they do make that little tweak with him. Sometimes it takes the offseason to make those tweaks, right? Because in the season, you're taking batting practice. You might be working on some things, but you're not doing your normal practices or normal cage work, right? Like, you're doing all that, but it's a little bit accelerated and a little bit different based off of what you're trying to do in that season then and there. So we will see. Maybe he made the adjustment in the offseason, but I think, do you have something to say?
Yeah, I was going to say something about Harper. Harper's I think the major adjustment Harper's made is hitting for average. Like, he's become an absolute monster since he started hitting around 300. Like, that's kind of what's propelled him to be, like, no doubt about it, top 10 hitter. Like, he is so good because he hits around 300. He's going to give you a 420 on base every single year, basically. Seems like. Yeah. I mean, it's just I wouldn't say. I think Harper hit home runs from the beginning, if I remember correctly. Yes. Mm-hmm. But I think the big adjustment he's made in his career is after he came to Philly, he started hitting for a lot higher average.
Sure. Yeah, I think it's a great point. I think with that, we get to Bryson Stott, who we both love, and us leaving him out of the leadoff spot is not like us saying like anything wrong. We're not saying he's doing anything wrong. And like I said, I think he's going to eventually move into that spot at some point in his career. But right now, I think he's perfectly fine at the 5-hole, especially, like I said, I'd like to see him walk a little more before he goes up to the leadoff spot. But Drew, this guy does everything. I mean, he feels well. In my opinion, he's a Gold Glove caliber second baseman. You saw it in 2022 when Segura was out. He was playing great defensive baseball at second base. And he can, if you needed him to, he could play short. God forbid something happened to Trey, knock on wood, that kept him out for an extended period of time. You could move Stott over to short and Merrifield to second if you needed to. Because Stott, I don't think he's like a Gold Glove caliber shortstop, I certainly think he's above average over there. And I think at second base, he's just incredible. There's a lot of baseballs he gets to, or a lot of diving plays he makes that a lot of guys don't make. So defensively, I have no concerns with him. He's awesome. And offensively, he just does the little things so well. He fights off a lot of foul balls, especially in the playoffs. He makes contact a lot of the time. Like, he's not going to go up there and strike out. Rarely does he do that. He has a really good eye. We'd still like to see him hit the high fastball a little bit better. But also the other thing is, like, while he does fight off a lot of pitches, you'd like him maybe to not be in those 2 strike counts. I did see something. I forget who exactly posted it, but I think it was Alex Coffey. She said they're going to try to let him go 0-0 and rip the first pitch this year. Yep. I love that. I think that would be great for Stott. You don't need to be aggressive every single time, depending on who the pitcher is, but you're going to get first pitch fastball a good amount of the time. And I think that Stott is the guy who he's going to go up there and he's just going to smoke it into the gap, or he's just going to get a single and get on base for you. So, if you have the top of the order, if you have those guys that, you clear the bases or it's a new inning or whatever, and you have then Stott getting on base to turn it over to the back of the order, I love that, because then you're basically going through the same cycle again, and you have Stott on base. He's going to steal a few bases here and there too. He's a good base runner, in my opinion. He just does everything so well. And he's not a power hitter, but he certainly doesn't lack a lot of power. Right? Like, he can hit for enough power for a player of his archetype. So I feel very good about Stott going into this year. I think he's going to get better again. I'm very excited to see how he performs. And another guy, like, I think, honestly, he might be one of the most likable players on the team. Like, he's not divisive. He does everything pretty well. Like, and he's just a good vibes guy, has a great walk-up song too. Like, everyone loves him, man. I don't see any points of division there, except if he should be in the leadoff spot or not, which that's not. I don't think anyone who doesn't think Stott should not be in the leadoff spot, or who thinks Stott shouldn't be there, is bashing him.
Yep. I mean, I think this is the only grade you can give him. I gave him an A+ from last year. I mean, he was incredible. I mean, he gave you everything you needed from him and more. I mean, everybody knew he was a good fielder, but when he went to second base, it's just like a switch flipped in his head and he became one of the best in the game. I mean, I think he finished second or third in Gold Glove voting, right?
I would guess so. I mean,
I think Nico Horner won it. Yeah.
He also another good player too.
Oh man. Yeah, he's good.
Very similar.
what I wrote down some stuff about every guy, and thing I wrote down for Stott is he's becoming like a star among stars. Like he's kind of sandwiched in between all these all-star players, and he's becoming one of those guys. Like I don't think the league is kind of on notice about him yet, but I think you give him 1 or 2 more years, and everybody's going to know who Bryson Stott is for sure.
Mhm.
And if he brings up the walks, like we said earlier, I was kind of waiting to say this. If he brings up the walks, he's no doubt about it going to be in the leadoff spot at some point here in the
Yes.
next 2 years, I would say.
100%. Yeah, I don't have anything else to add on that. I think the only other
Yeah.
point to make about Stott is what Chris brings up here. This has been talked about before. Do you move Stott to shortstop and Trey to second to, for a little more longevity from Trey? I still tend to think because Stott is a Gold Glove guy at second base, and I expect Trey to not be as bad as he was last year. I think they're fine where they are right now, and I certainly think anyone who goes over to second base is probably going to be a little bit better than they are at shortstop. There's a little bit like a little bit less responsibility over there. It's a tough position to play at shortstop. There's a lot of baseballs that if you don't get to them, you're going to be marked as responsible for them, especially in a lot of the metrics too. So I still feel good about where they're at right now. I certainly think at some point that could happen to where you probably will have a better infield if Stott is a shortstop and Turner is a second baseman. But I also don't think it's enough of a difference throughout the year to where you're saying this is costing us, potential playoff position or potential games in the playoffs either. I don't think that's necessarily something that it's a necessity to move those guys. And like we talked about, like I love Stott at second base. I think he's just a man amongst boys and when it comes to second baseman defensively.
Yep. I mean, I don't really think it's logical to switch them just because of how good Stott has become over there. I mean, he's like, I was watching, I think the Phillies posted it on YouTube a couple of days ago, their defensive highlights from last year, and it was literally just Rojas and Stott. It was like ridiculous. I mean, there was a couple guys sprinkled in there here and there, but like it was 90% those two guys because he's special over there, man. He's so fun to watch. Like there's nothing more fun. Like I don't know. I don't think Utley was probably even as good as he was. I mean, Utley was a great fielder, but Stott's very, very good. And he's like, there's nothing more fun to watch than a great fielder out there in the middle of the infield because he's like a vacuum cleaner. Like if the ball's coming near him, he's going to get it.
Yeah. Yeah. The thing I'll give Utley is I think he probably had the quicker hands. I mean, that guy could get the ball out of his glove in a hurry, but like overall defensively, I would probably take Stott too. Love Utley though. Oh man, that brings back some good memories. We'll get into that another time, but and I think the other thing too is like you said, Stott is now comfortable at second base, and I think there is something to be said about that. I'm sure he could do it. Like obviously he's played shortstop before, but if both those guys are comfortable where they are and Turner does improve, I think you'll be okay. I think you'll live.
Yeah.
But I do want to get to the next guy, Castellanos. This is definitely the most interesting one out of the lineup, I think, going into this year. Outside of I think the Rojas storyline is the biggest one, but the Castellanos story is interesting to me because he kind of bounces back last year. Definitely was better than the year before, but still not the level we were hoping he was going to be at. Then really carries us through the NLDS. Had an incredible series just to fall off and have the complete opposite series the next round. So, Drew, thoughts on Castellanos? He's your sixth guy in the lineup. I have him seventh. Definitely a guy we're hoping is going to produce at a higher level this year, but still pretty good last year.
Yeah, I believe if I remember correctly, he started last year in the 4-hole, right?
I would believe so. The lineup changed a number of times, so I don't exactly remember, but I would bet he batted there before.
Yeah, and I think when he did move down, I think he really kind of excelled a little bit more. I'm not sure why, but whenever he got moved out of that 4-hole, I feel like it kind of like flipped something for him, and he started hitting some more home runs and hitting for a little bit more average. I mean, I might be wrong, but that's just how it felt.
I think you're right.
But I mean, I gave him a B from last year just because I feel like he has more in the tank than what he gave us last year. I mean, he hit 29 home runs. I mean, can't really complain about that much, but I mean, he went absolutely ice cold whenever we were in the biggest point of the season. So that's just kind of unfortunate. But like you said, he did carry us through that Brave series. I mean, he took Strider way deep 2 times.
And once on 100 in the I get it was in the heart of the plate, but 100. He turned on 100 and sent it to left field with ease. That's
almost into the second deck. I mean, that's a monster home run.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think he could easily be a guy that gives you 100 RBIs if he has a great year. I mean, no question about it. He could hit 35 home runs, have 110 RBIs. But I think he's kind of to the point now where we can't really expect that because he hasn't really shown us that since he came here.
Yeah.
I mean, his contract is not a great one, obviously, at this point.
No.
But he's still a productive hitter. I mean, there's no question about it. But I mean, whenever he was in Cincinnati, he was just ridiculous.
Oh my gosh.
I don't remember what his numbers were, but he was just a totally different player than what we're getting. I mean, he's still very good. I mean, you're not going to just go get somebody off the street to replace his production. So,
right.
I mean, I think he's gonna have a good year. It's probably gonna be pretty comparable to last year, if I were to say. But I mean, anything can happen. You know, he could go back to that 2021 form.
Yeah, that's correct. That was the year he was with the Reds, and I was a big fan of Castellanos when he was on the Tigers. Like well before I even knew he was going to be a Philly. Not really defensively, but especially not at third base when he played there. But that's never really been his specialty. But I loved him there. I liked him in Chicago too. I don't exactly remember how well he played in Chicago. I just remember I liked when he got traded there. But in Cincinnati, man, I mean, he was an MVP caliber player. Just he played for Cincinnati, and they weren't really a playoff team, unfortunately. They weren't super, super far off, but they also weren't right there either. So it's a shame because Castellanos is a player I really, really want to be good. I do like the guy. He can get a little bit, like sometimes his personality can get a little bit annoying when things aren't going well. It doesn't mesh well. But when things are going well, he is very easy to root for because of the quotes he gives you in the post-game pressers, doing the ring finger celebration at the start of that. Like in the first game of that wild card, I'm thinking this is our revenge tour. Like we're going on that run. And it didn't pan out that way. But he wants a ring too. Like I think he does. And I'm really hoping he's going to be better next year. But I think Chris pretty much said it. It's the plate discipline. The chase rate is just so high. And it's not just a numbers thing. You see it game in and game out. And I think the problem was too, there were times where he was kind of just he would just look and take a pitch just for the sake of doing that in case it was a slider, right? Which then you fell into some spots where he was watching a fastball that was a strike. And granted, it did give him some better pitches to hit because he wasn't swinging at it 100% of the time like he was in 2022. But it still was to the point where a lot of pitchers knew they could probably get him on it if they needed to. And I think you saw that in the Diamondback series, unfortunately. I mean, the one at bat I'm thinking of in Game 7 where a sac fly would have done the job, and he swings at 3 sliders that, if I remember correctly, were in the zone too. They weren't even out of the zone. And that's demoralizing, man. I mean, that really, really does hurt to watch him go up there and do that. A guy who you've put a lot of money into and a guy who you've put not just that, but put a lot of belief into, because I think we both watched that previous version of Castellanos and think he's so much better than what we've seen even last year. Last year was fine, but you need more than fine from Castellanos if you're going to get over the hump. I think that's really the key is him. You can't go ice cold. It's kind of like the James Harden thing I've talked about where he had the 2 40-point games and then game 6 and 7, he was kind of non-existent. So you need, if they're not going to be as good as they were at their peak, you need them to still be a semblance of what they are regularly. You can't have them completely fall off a cliff.
Yeah, you can't go 0 for 21 in the NLCS.
No,
That's just
no, you cannot.
that's not good. But yeah, we're kind of on the same page with him. I mean, he could have a great year, but I mean, I feel like we're kind of just at the point where it is what it is.
Yeah,
and I mean, I don't really have much else to say about him, honestly. Like you said, his personality can definitely become a little bit toxic whenever they're not winning, and things aren't going his way. But I mean, kind of take the good with the bad, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, and I think as far as the locker room goes too, I think they're still going to have us back regardless. Like it's never going to be anything against them, but between the media and the fans, it can definitely get a little hostile, as we saw when he got pretty upset with Jim Salisbury a couple of years ago. That was not pretty. But also, this is also an interesting thing I've thought about too, which is I've always thought Bohm might move to left field at some point, just because like he's not the slowest guy. I know it's not his natural position, but we've seen guys move from third to left before, and maybe that could happen. I don't see right now a spot for him with who's on the roster, but you're talking maybe 3-4 years down the road, especially if Cassidy is not here. And, you also have Schwarber's contract up at that point too. So the core is going to be probably shaken up a little bit in a couple of years, but that's an interesting conversation. We don't need to talk about that right now, but I do think it's an interesting conversation to think about down the road. I don't
Yeah.
know if you have anything on that.
Yeah, honestly, I don't feel like he would be a great left fielder, honestly. That's just the way I feel about him. I think he's more built to play first base long term, and I think he's probably going to end up doing it for another team because they're not going to take Bryce off first base at this point. And I believe that they've said multiple times they think Miller is a third baseman long term. So
Okay.
that
Yeah.
kind of tells you how they feel about him.
Sure.
But I don't really have much else on that.
Gotcha. Yeah. Yeah, as far as Justin Crawford goes, he's still a little bit of a ways, I think, away from.
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing for him next will be that high A to double A jump he potentially makes this year or the next, and so we're still a little bit away with him.
Yeah. Also with Crawford, I mean, I don't follow prospects like down like under a microscope or anything, but I know he is at the very earliest going to be here in 2026 because he's hitting the ball into the ground like 70% of the time. Like he doesn't elevate the ball at all. It's kind of scary, honestly. Like I'm pretty low on Crawford, honestly, as a prospect in general, and I think he's out of the top 5 prospects. I think he's probably the furthest away from the majors because he has no power right now. I mean, he does not elevate the ball at all. He hits the ball hard, which you'll see that in his numbers, and that's not a bad thing, but you have to hit the ball in the air or you're never going to make it, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And I think he has the potential to do that, and I really hope he does because he's a special defender. He's exactly like Rojas. He's very fast.
Yes.
Steals a lot of bases. So he's far away though, definitely.
Yeah. And I like De La Cruz too. He's fun. He's very tall. He's obviously got a big frame. He hits a lot for power. But another guy, like the outfield is kind of crowded right now, and I don't know if he's going to perform at that level up in the big leagues yet. I think he still needs some time too. And I could also see him potentially being a trade piece at some point as well. But another conversation.
Yeah. He has big chase rates. He chases a ton of pitches.
Yeah, that as well. And we did talk about the leadoff, so you can go back and rewind if you would like to. Sorry, I know. I apologize that we already did that, but yeah, we talked a lot about Trey at the 2-hole too, which definitely a lot of excitement for Trey going into this year. And yeah, I mean, basically what you just said, Drew, like very similar prospects. Obviously, not the exact same player, not the exact same swing, but if you're looking at it as an overview, yeah, very similar. I mean, Rojas, like Chris said, probably has a little more power. I think Rojas is going to hit for a little more power this year, which we'll talk about, but Crawford, like you said, every time you watch the highlights, I love the guy, but he is hitting the baseball into the ground a lot, and it's kind of hopping out of the infield into the outfield. Definitely like a fun prospect because of the speed and the defense, but not quite there.
Yeah, and he has a lot of infield singles, and the big league defenders are typically a lot better than what you're going to see in single A. So I think, I think he's definitely a long ways away. I mean, he might not even be here till 2027, which is kind of unfortunate, but he's only, I believe, 19 years old. And I mean, he has a lot of potential, obviously. I mean, he hit like 300 some last year. I mean, batting averages and everything, but he's hitting the ball hard consistently, which you do want to see. And I think he could be here and make an impact here in a couple of years for sure.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. With that said, yeah, thank you for tuning in, Monty, too. We appreciate you, man. Thanks for the questions. We appreciate it. And thanks for, they were very much related to Castellanos, too. So I'm glad we talked about them. But we also did talk about Montgomery. I know, sorry, we did talk about that early in the stream. But hey, if you want to talk more Phils, talk about Montgomery, too. We've got our Discord. We can drop the link in the chat. We'd love to see some of you guys there as well. And we have the Discord going. We're going to have some mailbag episodes coming up this season as well. So me and Drew are going to get questions from you guys in the community tab and Go Philly Sports. I don't know if I've seen you on the channel before, so we're glad to officially welcome you to the channel. And we are going to be having some of those mailbags. We'll put it in the community tab. We'll put it in the Discord. You guys drop your questions, and we'll just go through the questions in one episode, which I'm looking forward to this season. Probably do that a little closer to end of spring training, but just something to throw out there. But with that said, Drew, we have talked about a lot of the lineup now. We're getting to the bottom 3 spots, which I have JT in my 6 hole, I believe, but you have him in 7. I do think there are some concerning things with JT going into this year. I do think he's starting to decline. I think it would, if we had someone better than Stubbs, you could probably keep him on his feet a little bit more, but there's just not a lot of backup catchers out there. It's a hard position to fill. And point being, there's some stuff even with a backup catcher. I think there's just stuff with JT that is a little bit concerning going into this year. I did hear, I forget where I heard this from. I did hear that he did work on a hole with his, I think Jack Fritz tweeted it out. I forget where he heard it from, but there's some hole with his swing that he did work on going into this year. That is encouraging because I think there was, JT's a guy who I've always said, like, he'll kind of heat up at the end of the year and his numbers will level out. I didn't feel like he did that a ton last year. It didn't stand out to me necessarily. He did lead the team in RBIs in the playoffs, though. Like, he still did it in the playoffs. But it is encouraging to hear that his swing is it sounds like it's a lot better. And hopefully he's not getting fooled by the sinkers down and in anymore. I think that was a big problem for him last year. And I think a lot of people have mentioned that too. That's not my original thought, but I know a lot of people have talked about that. So I'm encouraged by that. I think he's going to hit 6 or 7, regardless of which one it is. He's hitting there because we haven't been able to trust him in the 4 hole because he hasn't quite been that guy. I think it would be great if he could be there because I do think his experience is important there, and he has power, right? Like, he definitely has more power than Bohm has shown to this point. But I think there's times with runners in scoring position where JT was not the best last year. Defensively, he, at his age, for how much he has played, man, he is still very, very good. Still has a great arm. Obviously, the rule changes have thrown a wrench in his defensive value, unfortunately. That sucks, but he is still one of the better defensive catchers in the game. Blocking is still very good, still frames the ball well. Like, yeah, sure, the StatCast will say that other guys do it better than him, but who's a better all-around defensive catcher than JT? I don't know too many guys in the league who are better all around. There's some better hitters than JT at the catcher position now, probably some younger guys coming up too, but still feel very good about JT going into this year.
Yeah, it's kind of the same story it's been for the last 3 years with him. I mean, catching the catcher position overall is just very, very thin. There's very few good ones, and there's definitely catchers that are better defenders than JT, and there's better hitters at the catcher position than JT. But 99% of them don't do both. Like Salvador Perez, I feel like he's pretty much an absolute liability back there at this point. But I mean, he hits a lot of home runs, and like that's just kind of an example. Like he does everything well or good at this point. And last year he was the metrics really hated him last year as far as like framing and stuff, and his hard hit percentage went down. He was chasing a lot. He wasn't walking, and I think like. I don't know. He still brings you great value because he does everything good enough, And a couple years ago, it was a different story. He did everything great. Like, he was elite at pretty much everything. And I think he might have figured something out of the swing. I really hope he did because he could become a total force again this year, like he was 2 years ago.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think also to that point, there's like a couple other catchers that are faster than JT. I think Connor Wong was one of the fastest of Boston, but I mean, the guys who are faster, they don't do much else well either. Like, they're not as well-rounded as JT is. The fact that he brings you what he does at the plate and with the glove, and he also has speed too. Like, you have to consider this guy's squatting down for 140 games a year. That's not easy. Maybe 120, maybe not 140, but that's still not easy to have that speed. On top of that, like that's really, really impressive that he's able to still keep up the speed that well and swipe some bags and be a good base runner and sometimes score from first to home. What other catcher do you know is scoring from first to home on a double in the gap? There's not too many of them. So I still think JT, like you said, sure, he's not the best at some of those things, but I still really like what he brings to the table. And I think you probably bring him back again once his contract's up in a couple of years because JT he's just the full package. And like you said, Drew, there's not a lot of catchers. I would love to replace Stubbs at some point, but as far as a starting catcher goes, there's not a lot out there. And you're really risking it if you don't have JT out there. So yeah, sure, he can be frustrating sometimes. I get frustrated in him, but he's so much better than the alternative, which is who knows. There's no guarantee you get a guy in his place.
Yeah, I mean, at the worst last year, he was still a top 5 catcher, and he had what we would say for him a bad year, which that just kind of tells you how good he really is and how good he was the last couple of years. Like his absolute worst year he's had with us, he's still a top 5 catcher. It ain't like he's going out there hitting 210 with the 250 on base. And I think he still had close to 20 homers last year, if I remember correctly, which not a lot of catchers do.
Mm-hmm. No, I'm with you, Joe. I'm with you. I don't really have too much else to say on JT, to be quite honest. I think we pretty much said it all. A few comments here. And yeah, I mean, the comment was not. Drew knows I'm not a huge fan of that comment. It was not great. It was actually a bigger reason in us losing the series, unfortunately, than I wish it was. But point being, also the lineup also went cold too. Like there's other reasons as well.
Yeah, you got nothing out of a couple of your guys in the middle of the order. You're just not going to score runs like that. It's just It is what it is.
Yeah, would have preferred he didn't say anything, but nothing you can do now. The past is the past. And yeah, we did a video on the starting rotation. We talked about Chris Sanchez. We're both very high on him, so make sure you go check that out if you haven't. But Chris says, I'm surprised we didn't address the backup catcher role. Me and Drew were talking about this the other day. It will be important to get JT off his feet more as he ages, and Stubbs just didn't get done last year in that role. Yeah, I think most of the reason why Stubbs is here is because he costs less than $1 million, and he does have the defense there to give JT the day games off. Well, before I say the but, I think also at the same time, like, who else are you signing to fulfill that role? To your point, Drew, it's maybe Gary Sanchez, and he's a hitter. Like, he's not going to give you. He's pretty bad defensively. I think people will get pretty frustrated with him. I'm not saying Stubbs is one of the better backup catchers in baseball, but the options aren't plentiful. I would love if Marchand developed enough to the point where he could probably be that guy, but I think you want to get him reps in AAA to continue to develop, and also he's not. I'm not saying Stubbs is proven at the major league level, but we know what he can do as a backup catcher. And if an option becomes available, sure, I would love to replace Garrett Stubbs, but it has to be at the right price and has to be for the right guy too, who's actually going to keep JT off his feet more often than not.
Yeah. And also, Marchand has never played a full season of pro ball yet. He can't stay healthy, so that's just another issue.
Yeah. And like, I know people will point to him coming up here and hitting well. Small sample size. Like, I really do like Marchand, but you can't expect him to hit like he has the few times he's come up over one. He's not going to play 162, but even over like what Stubbs has played around 40 games, even over that span, that is a larger sample size, especially when you're not playing every day as well. So yeah, I don't believe Drew is outside right now, as far as I know. So
I'm not.
Yeah. Glad you can confirm that for us, Drew. But yeah, and we got a few more comments down here. I did notice Jonathan says in the spring training videos, it did look like JT was focusing more on framing. I recognize small sample size, but it seems like he's trying to address it. Yeah, that could also really improve his defensive game too, because that's probably the weakest part of his defensive game if there was one. So, yeah, with that said, we get to the last two guys, Marsh and Rojas. Marsh hitting 8th probably. Yep. It sounds like he will be back come regular season or come opening day. That's encouraging. Yep. Really sucked that came out of nowhere.
He was jogging today. I saw that. So that's good news.
And it was encouraging to see he was good enough to go out on the golf course with Larry Boa and Bryson Stott and those guys. That was a fun watch. I didn't get to watch the whole thing, but I heard Larry Boa hit a hole in one. So
yeah, that's crazy. But Marsh, I believe Marsh only putted, unfortunately.
Okay. Hey, we'll take whatever signs we can get though. He's walking around out there.
Yep. Having a good time.
Right. Yeah. Always having a good time. If there was one player I would love to have on this podcast, I mean, I think he would be the most energetic guy and one of the most fun to talk to, honestly. That would be awesome. Yeah. Hey, if any of you guys know Brandon Marsh, let him know we want to have him on Philly Insider. But that being said, in all seriousness, I really liked what Marsh brought to the table last year. And I think there's definitely some good signs. Definitely still things he needs to be better at. Especially, strikeout rate, I think, is one of them. We'll get into it, but I do want to hear your thoughts first on it, Drew. I'm curious to hear how you kind of graded Marsh's season. And also, I forgot for Castellanos, I gave him a C+, a B- for last year. And then for Real Muto, I think I gave Real Muto just a B because, again, for the relative to the position, he's so much better than what you could have.
Yeah, I was doing mine based off expectations, and I gave JT a D because he was just bad last year. I mean, there's really no way around it. As far as his expectations go, I mean, as far as catchers go, he was still great. So
yeah. Mm-hmm.
But for Marsh, I gave him an A. I mean, he was just everything you needed from him last year. He was hitting doubles, he was hitting some home runs, But the thing with him is, like, I forget what his average was last year. It was like almost 280 or something like that, or 290. But his BABIP, which is batting average on balls in play, it was very high. And honestly, a lot of people are kind of expecting that to like regress a lot. I think it might a little bit just because there's a lot of luck involved, obviously. But when you're making solid contact, which I feel like he was for most of the season, your BABIP is going to be higher. I mean, higher exit velocities, lead to better results. But I think he's still going to be a high BABIP guy for his whole career. He has been so far in his career. Even when he was with the Angels, he had around a 300 or 400 BABIP, I believe. But I think a little regression to the mean would definitely be right. Like, it would be right on line with what I would expect. But he's still going to be probably pretty close to what he was this year. He might hit a little bit more power. You never know. But he's a kind of a line-to-line guy at this point. He hits the ball all over the place. And he's obviously Gold Glove candidate out there in left field. And he's going to give you a 750 OPS or more. Like, he gave you an 815, I believe, last year. That's you take that every day from your 8-hitter. He's very solid.
Yeah. Just seeing where Marsh is, even if he doesn't get any better and he gets a little bit worse, seeing where he came from with the Angels, which dead organization, yeah, there's things to fix over there, unfortunately. Seeing where he came from his time in the major leagues in LA to where he is now, he's already made incredible improvements. And I think the biggest thing I took away from Marsh last year was the 12.5% walk rate. The guy was so much more disciplined. And I think Kevin Long deserves a lot of credit for that. And they've done a lot of work together. I also don't think the 30.5% strikeout rate was as high as it really was, because I think there was a number of times early in the year where he got called out on some bogus calls that were out of the zone. It happened multiple times to Brandon Marsh. Granted, maybe that only decreases it to 29%, but I think when you're looking at it, at just the numbers, I think that does make a big difference in perspective if he's striking out 28% of the time versus 30% of the time. That does make a difference when a fan is looking at it, in my opinion. But yeah, I still feel really good about that. I think my big prediction for this year would be he's going to be under a 30% strikeout rate and probably around a 12-11% walk rate again. Maybe 10. Might, like you said, might see some regression from me in a lot of departments, but I still think he's going to be very much what we need from him. And I would like to see him hit a little bit more versus lefty this year just to get some more reps. I do think there was some improvement there, and some, maybe not necessarily statistically, but I think there were flashes there versus lefties where you're like, oh, that was a fairly good at bat. Not a lot of the time, but there were a few here and there where I was like, that's encouraging. Stott obviously took a major step in that category, which we actually didn't talk about that with him, where he was much better against lefties last year to the point where you're probably not platooning Merrifield with him at all this year. But as far as Marsh goes, yeah, you're probably going to see, like Chris said, you're probably going to see Merrifield platoon with him a decent bit, especially early in the year. And also that just helps with Marsh coming off the knee injury to keep him fresh, help him ease back into action too. Gives you some opportunities there. So I still feel great about Marsh. Like you said, in left field, he is a great defender. He's above average in center, but he doesn't have some boneheaded plays, doesn't get the best jumps. In left field, he was freaking incredible last year, in my opinion. Like, he was really, really good. I don't think he gets enough credit for that. So I'm excited for him this year, man. I think Marsh is going to be really good. I don't know if you have anything else to say on him.
I don't know if anybody remembers, but whenever we got him in the middle of 2021, right? Or 22. Okay. Well, whenever he came to us, he was on the Gold Glove ballot for left field in the AL.
Yes.
I don't know if anybody remembers that, but he was. Mm-hmm. So that tells you kind of what you can expect from him.
Yeah. I remember that very well because I remember going on a Savant page when we traded for him, and I was like, why is he – we needed a center fielder. He's much better in left field than center. And at the time, we kind of just needed someone in center to patrol with Schwarber. Like, people forget we had Schwarber and Castellanos playing out there. So you're gonna take any improvement you can get defensively, and he helped us make the World Series. But man, all I can think about now is, like, imagine if you had this year's hitting version of Marsh in that World Series. I think maybe it's a little bit of a different story. And he was not the reason we lost, but I just think, like, he did come up in some spots in that series where I'm thinking, man, if he was as good as he is now, I would love to go back and replay that series. But that's part of being a baseball player and being a young baseball player is you're going to get better as the years go on. And that's just kind of where we're at with Marsh. He's gotten better. So encouraged by that. Should we move on to Rojas and finish out here?
Yep, I think we can.
All right. Go Philly Sports has a comment for us too. Rojas is strong now. He definitely has bulked up. As Rob Thompson said, he thought it was maybe him at first when he was looking at the picture. So that's encouraging to hear that Rob has confirmed it. He definitely looks bigger, but do you think he'll have more power? And we'll answer this as we kind of talk about Rojas here. So I'll hand it to you first because I
Okay.
think a lot of our podcast. I don't know if there's a podcast here where we have not talked about Rojas because he's
Yeah.
probably our biggest storyline going into this year is what is he going to look like? And you do have a little insurance with Merrifield now to where you would probably put Marsh in center and Merrifield left if I had to guess if Rojas doesn't play well. But I also think that could lead you to make a deadline move if that's the case. Not that I don't think Merrifield would be good, but I don't know if over a full 162 if you can sustain that success for Merrifield. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on Rojas going into this year, Drew. There's a lot of them, but
yeah,
give us your overview of Rojas and what you're expecting from him and what you thought of him last year.
Yeah. For last year, I gave him a B because he was kind of like, I didn't hear anybody talking about him being on the roster at any point before it happened because he was only in Double A. But yeah, he was kind of an afterthought because like if everybody knew what he was a great defender that really had trouble hitting, and he came up to the major leagues and he had 300 average during the regular season, which nobody thought that would happen. And obviously that's not what he is going to be. He's going to be more like a 250, 260 hitter, but he's still like very electric. Like his defense, if he can hit around 260 or 250, he's probably going to give you around a 700 OPS. He's going to hit a lot of extra base hits, like not home runs, I would say. Like he commented, like Go Philly Sports commented, I'm not expecting him to hit anything more than like 7 or 8 home runs in a year. I mean, that's just not really who he is. But he might run into some, he might get up to 10 or 11 or 12. But he's going to be, as long as he can sit around a 700 OPS, I would say you take that every day of the week because his defense is more than enough to keep him afloat. Because if he keeps that 700 OPS or around that, I think he's probably a 6 WAR player just based on his defense easily. Mm-hmm. So I think he could definitely stick as long as he shows them that he's improved.
Definitely, yeah.
And I'm expecting him to stick, I will add.
Mm-hmm. There you go. So you got Drew's prediction there. Yeah, I'm going to be watching his at bats like a hawk this year for sure. And that's because I really want him to do well, man. I think if he plays well, it solves so many other potential problems for the Phillies, and it makes this team so much better if he's a good enough hitter. And I think with the plate discipline, it might be rough early just because the only way you can really improve that is live in-game at bats. That's just going to take time. I'm sure they worked on it this offseason, and I'm sure that they've done some things and put some things in place to where they're hoping it's going to translate to the in-game at bats too. And I love that. But I think, the only way you can do it is by facing live pitching. And, unfortunately, you're not going to face that playoff caliber pitching until the playoffs. And that's what we kind of saw last year. And I think a lot of you and me, I think probably expected that to happen, that he wasn't going to be the same hitter come the playoffs, unfortunately. It really does suck that he was as bad as he was in the postseason. It's unfortunate, but I also I think it might've been a good thing for him too, because look at the way we've heard about and seen Rojas work this offseason. I'm not saying he wouldn't have worked that hard, but I think that gave him a little extra edge too, to where he realized it was not good enough, but he also realized I have an opportunity to go solidify a spot next year. And if I can't be disciplined, if I can't hit, I'm not going to be sticking around in the major leagues. And obviously you don't know, if you don't stick around in the major leagues, you could be on another team before you know it. This is Rojas' shot. I'm not saying if he doesn't pan out at the start of the year, he's not going to ever be the Philly center fielder again. But it's certainly one of those things where if I'm in Rojas' spot, I'm thinking, I don't know if I'm going to have that opportunity again, so I need to make the most of it. So I'm hoping that he's really going to take that into account, and I think he has, and I think you can see by the offseason work. And I think Chris hit the nail on the head. If he can learn to bunt, he's going to be a lot better too. That's going to give him a lot more opportunities as well. He was terrible. I mean, he was awful at bunting. He did get the one down in the playoffs that they asked him to. Thank the Lord. But I mean, it was bad. The bunting is something that he's god awful at, but I think he's going to be better at it this year too. I'm sure he worked on that this offseason as well. He doesn't need to be great at bunting. He just needs to be able to get the bunt on the ground and not straight up into the air, right? And then we can go from there, right? We can make the necessary adjustments as it goes. And I got it. It's I was a good bunter when I played baseball, but I obviously was not facing 90 to 100 on average every day. It's hard. It's really hard. And especially when you don't know what pitch is coming and how, a pitch that has late break, it's a whole nother ballgame. But I do think, like you said, Drew, if he can hit 250, 260, I would even take 240, honestly. If he can do that, I think they're going to be okay. I think the biggest question with him, honestly, isn't even how he starts the season. It's how he finishes after the All-Star break. Because if he has a solid first half of the season, and then he starts to deteriorate as the year goes on, and, we didn't make a deadline move because we trusted him, that's a rough spot to be in. And then I guess that's why you have Merrifield, because then you have that insurance there, and Merrifield hasn't played as many games, hopefully, if that is the scenario we're in. But it is a little bit of a scary situation to think about. But I'm torn, because I really do want him to do well. I'm not willing to say he is like definitely going to solidify his spot like you, but I do think that with his work ethic and with what he's done, I think I would lean that way for sure. I think he's definitely got a good shot to do that. So I'm excited. And like Chris said, yeah, I mean, more than Freddie and Mookie combined in the playoffs. So there's that going for him as well. Wow. Yeah, that was a rough series for the Dodgers, to say the least. And go Philly Sports. Thank you for tuning in. We appreciate you. Welcome to the channel, by the way.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's kind of what I have on Rojas, man. I didn't say anything on the defense because, I mean, you sent the thing in the Discord earlier today, Drew. The guy's freaking insane. And he's he had like similar defensive runs saved. The guys who played way more innings than him in the outfield, I think you put out there. You probably have the exact number, but
yeah, I can get it.
He's so good. And I honestly think the only thing he's got to improve defensively is his arms just got to be more accurate. He's got a rope, man. I mean, that dude's got a cannon for an arm, but he's just got to be able to hit his target. That's the only thing I think he's got to improve upon defensively.
Yeah, the best outfielder by defensive run saved last year was Dalton Varsho, and he had 29, and he had 1,280 innings. And Rojas had 15 defensive runs saved in 400 innings. So like a third, and he had half of he's like a 45 defensive run saved outfielder. Yeah. He plays a full season, which is just outrageous.
It's insane. It's insane. Like, I think you said it before, Drew, and I've definitely copied what you've said when I've been talking to other friends about this. Like, he could win he is, if he sticks around all next year, he'll be up for a platinum glove. Not even a doubt.
No question.
That guy's crazy. I mean, speaking of which, crazy that Tatis was so good in right field last year after just
he has a cannon.
Yeah, he sure
Bryce
does.
Harper-esque.
Yes. He's good. He's real good in right field. It's kind of funny how that's like the made fun of position in little leagues, and in the big leagues, there's like, we've seen so many right fielders in our lifetime that are so freaking good. And that's like sometimes the best player on your team. But little side note. But yeah, I don't know if you have anything else to say on Rojas. I think the base running, the only other thing I would say is got to be a little more cautious there, because I think there were times he got caught dancing, and also a couple times he got lucky too. But it's the only other concern I have with him.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's going to be good. I think he has obviously has a lot of potential. Like, he's very exciting to watch. So as long as he makes the team and keeps hitting the way that got him on the team, I think we're going to have a very, very good year as far as the outfield's concerned.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, and I like what Chris says too, to kind of wrap this night up, that he's typing something very similar, and then Drew says the exact same thing. So, I mean, yeah, that sums it up for you right there. Glad you and Drew are on the same track for sure. Always good to hear that. I'm glad we have some similar minds in that Discord too. And yeah, if you guys aren't in the Discord, again, put the link in the chat. Make sure you guys go join. But a couple more comments here. Yeah, I mean, I think out of these two options, paying $3K for Marsh to come on the podcast or tweeting at him every day, probably take our chances with tweeting at him every day. That's not a bad idea, obviously. Maybe we do that every morning when we get up. Is just, all right, let's tweet at Brandon Marsh, see if he wants to come on the pod. But it'll be a little hard with the season starting up. But maybe next off season, that'll be our new endeavor. Yeah, and Mr. Rudy, I think they're probably done for the off season.
Yeah.
Me and Drew would have liked to see them add a bullpen arm, but I think they're going to do that at the deadline.
Yep. I think the thing about this spring training, I'll just kind of sidebar this, is we don't really have any exciting, I guess you could say, non-roster invitees. Like, there's really nothing outside of Mick Abel, honestly. I mean, there's a couple guys that are they have good stuff, like James Buchanan, I believe.
David Buchanan, yeah.
David Buchanan.
Yeah.
But I mean, he's got great stuff, obviously. He had a great 3 years, I believe, in the KBO.
Yes.
So that could be a guy that could make the team. You never know.
Yeah. Yeah. I know the one guy Jack Fritz is high on is Ryan Burr. So just because of that, I mean, I'm sure Jack knows more about him than I do. So I'll be keeping an eye on him. Unfortunately, Caleb Ort, not a non-roster guy, but he got traded, so he's out of the running for that last spot in the bullpen after like 2 days after he gets here. But the other, I don't know that there's too many guys. I mean, I'm trying to think. I feel like there's another guy. I mean, we'll have the usual Scott Kingery invite. That we know how that goes. No offense to Scott, love the guy, but he deserved a change of scenery so long ago. It's a crime that he's still here. Yeah, I don't know if there's any other guys I'm like super, super looking forward to in spring. Like you said, like there's not a ton of storylines. I think it really is just like that spot that comes down to Brogdon, Rucker, Marte. And I think those are really the three guys. I think Mercado will probably start in the minors. And Rucker also has a minor league option too, so I could very much see him. If Brogdon's not traded and he performs fine, I think it's his spot. I mean, he doesn't have a minor league option, obviously. So as long as he's not traded, he's probably going to start the year on the roster unless they just DFA him and they couldn't find a trade and they don't have anything left for him. So, or have any spot left for him. I don't know. Anything else you want to say before we sign off, Drew? I think we covered a lot.
Yeah. I think it was kind of a shame they didn't get anything for McKinley Moore when they DFA'd him. I kind of thought that was odd. That didn't really make any sense to me. But, that's kind of the risk you take when you DFA somebody.
Yeah. And I'm with you. I thought he had real good stuff. I think his slider was really impressive. Obviously, it did not go well the one game he was up here last year, but I think you can't just go off of that and give up on him. I don't think the Phillies did do that. They obviously have more data than we do on him, but I don't know. I would have liked to see him stick around. I think, like you said, there were other guys that would have made sense to DFA. And they haven't DFA'd Jay Cave, so they're very much looking. That was the thing. I wanted to say David Dahl. That's the other guy I'm kind of interested to see what happens with him. He's probably, even though he's a non-roster guy, I would say he's competing for a bench spot. That's something we definitely need to talk about the next time is the Pache Cave bench, kind of look like who's going to get the last bench spot, and then David Dahl in that conversation too, because I think that's an interesting one to have. I kind of originally thought one thing, and I've kind of gone back and forth on it a little bit. I think there's reasons to keep both. So I'd prefer it to be Pache. But anyway, I'm rambling here. We covered a lot. Thank you guys so much for listening. Everyone in the Discord, everyone from the community tab, and just subscribers of the channel. We appreciate you guys a ton. Welcome to the channel. Any new members we have, and we're looking forward to it. This is probably the longest podcast we'll do just because it was the lineup and there's a lot to talk about. But we're looking forward to covering the season, watching some games with you guys on the Discord, covering some post games on here. A lot of fun stuff coming up, mailbags, a lot of fun stuff, Drew.
Yeah, absolutely. We all, like Hunter said, we appreciate all you guys' support. I feel like it's going the right direction right now for sure. Like we're getting the Discord going. I think most people that are in the chat tonight are in the Discord, which is nice. But it's a great way to know whenever we're going live or whatever we're doing that night. We're going to be doing emergency pods, like whenever something crazy happens during the season or whatever it may be. So, the best way to keep up with us now definitely is going to be in the Discord, because we can kind of tag everybody and notify you whatever's going on. So definitely get in there if you're not in there for sure.
Sure. Yeah. And Drew's dropping a lot of good content, like tweets and stuff in there that he'll see pop up. And the nice thing is you got so many people dropping different tweets and maybe stuff you maybe didn't have notifications on for that you'll see. And maybe you just missed it. Maybe you weren't on Twitter at the time and it got lost in the shuffle of things. So a lot of good stuff getting put on there that I'm not seeing on Twitter too. So a lot of good info on the Phillies. So this was fun, Drew. Looking forward to the next one. And
absolutely.
Thank you guys so much for tuning in. And we will see you guys on the next pod next week at some point. So looking forward to it. Any last words, Drew?
Nope. Everybody have a great night. Enjoy the games this weekend. I'm excited. Yeah. I'm sure I'll be in the Discord talking about it or whatever it may be. So everybody enjoy it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, guys. God bless you all. We will see you guys later. Peace out.
Have a good night. Peace.